The park was louder earlier. That's what Jasmine would remember later, the way the children had been screaming near the swings, the squeak of rusted chains, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, a woman calling out a name that didn't belong to either of them. But when Trey finally spoke, all of it had faded. Not suddenly, gradually, like the world understood something serious was about to happen and decided to lower its voice. The sun hung low, stretching gold across the pavement. The light caught in Jasmine's hair, turning the edges copper. She didn't notice. She was too busy watching Trey's hands. They were clasped, too tight. He wasn't looking at her. That was new. Normally he held eye contact with an ease that made her feel chosen. Not examined, not weighed, just wanted. And now he was staring at the gravel near his shoes like it held instructions. "You've been quiet," she said lightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Don't tell me you're tired of me already." She expected the quick grin, the shoulder nudge, the playful comeback. It didn't come. He inhaled slowly. "I've been praying," he said. Her body relaxed immediately. Prayer meant seriousness, depth, intention. She liked that about him, liked that he wasn't careless with words like forever. "That's good," she replied, softening. "About what?" He swallowed. "About us." Her heart fluttered, not from fear, but anticipation. She'd been waiting for this kind of conversation, the kind where futures get named out loud. Marriage had come up before loosely, in jokes, in passing comments, in those half-serious hypotheticals couples throw around to test reactions, but this felt heavier, official. She sat up straighter. "Well?" She pressed gently. The wind moved between them, carrying the scent of cut grass and something faintly sweet from a nearby food cart packing up for the evening. "I don't think," he began carefully, "that I'm supposed to keep walking with you." The words didn't register at first. They hovered, like a foreign language she almost understood but didn't want to translate. She blinked. "What?" "I don't think I'm meant to lead you." Led. The word irritated her immediately. She wasn't a project. She wasn't waiting to be carried. They were building together, equal, mutual. "Where is this coming from?" she asked, her voice sharpening without her permission. "From being honest," he said quietly, and she let out a small, humorless laugh. "So what? You wake up one day and decide we're wrong for each other?" "No," he replied. "I've been feeling this for a while." The air changed. There it was, that sentence, "for a while." "How long is a while?" she asked. He hesitated. Too long. Her stomach tightened. Before Trey, there had been Marcus. The memory came uninvited. Marcus never hesitated when he spoke, not because he was reckless, but because he weighed things before saying them. When he told her something, it had already survived his doubt. Marcus didn't make her pulse spike. He didn't make her nervous in the way Trey did. There were no dramatic kisses in parking lots, no spontaneous road trips, no grand gestures that made strangers smile at them. But when Marcus prayed, it felt like he believed God was actually listening. When Marcus talked about the future, it wasn't fantasy. It was structure. "I don't want to rush," he had told her once, sitting across from her at a small cafe with chipped wooden tables. "But I also don't want to waste time if this is right." She remembered staring at him, waiting for the spark, waiting to feel swept. Instead, she felt calm, safe, certain, and that certainty unsettled her. "Don't you ever feel nervous?" she had asked him that night. "Like butterflies?" He smiled slightly. "No." That bothered her more than it should have. "You're just sure?" she pressed. "I'm at peace," he corrected gently. "Peace." At the time, it sounded like a polite way of saying average. She didn't want average. She wanted a story. She went home that night and prayed, not because she didn't know what she felt, but because she wanted her feelings validated. The answer that settled over her wasn't loud. It didn't shake the room. It didn't send chills down her spine. It was steady, stay. But staying felt like settling, and settling felt like fear. Then Trey walked into her life like volume turned up too high. He laughed easily, talked fast, moved with confidence. When he looked at her, she felt electricity. When he grabbed her hand unexpectedly in the grocery store aisle, her heart raced. That had to mean something. Didn't it? She prayed again. This time the answer felt quieter, almost distant. Or maybe she was. She chose what moved her. She told herself God wouldn't give her desires just to deny them. She told herself peace wasn't the only language he spoke. Back on the bench, Trey finally answered her question. "A couple months," he admitted. And the words hit harder than the original statement. "A couple months?" she repeated. "So you've been pretending?" "I wasn't pretending," he said. "I was hoping the feeling would change." "And it didn't?" He shook his head. Her chest tightened, not just with hurt, but with something more uncomfortable, recognition. She had done the same thing once, hoped peace would turn into excitement, hoped certainty would transform into butterflies. It never had, and she had walked away because of it. Now someone was walking away from her for a different reason. "When I pray about you," Trey continued, "I feel like I'm slowing you down." She almost scoffed. "You think you're holding me back?" "I think," he said carefully, "that you're called to something I'm not ready to step into." His honesty made her angrier than any lie could have, because lies are easier to dismiss. Honesty demands reflection. "I didn't ask you to be perfect," she said, her voice quieter now. "I know." "Then why does it sound like you're giving up?" He finally looked at her, really looked. "I'm not giving up," he said softly. "I'm stepping aside." The sun dipped lower. The world dimmed another shade, and somewhere deep inside her, beneath the hurt and pride and confusion, a memory stirred. Not of Trey, of quiet, of stillness, of the kind of peace she once rejected. And for the first time since he started speaking, she wasn't entirely sure the pain she felt was only about losing him. She didn't cry in front of him. That part would matter to her later. She kept her face composed, chin slightly lifted, eyes steady even when they burned. If this was ending, she would not unravel on a public bench while strangers walked dogs and children begged for 5 more minutes on the slide. "So that's it?" she asked. The question sounded calmer than she felt. "I think it has to be," Trey said. There was no cruelty in him. That almost made it worse. If he had been dismissive, careless, distracted, she could have packaged the breakup into something easier to carry. But he looked grieved and certain. Certainty was hard to argue with. She nodded once, slow, like she was agreeing to terms in a contract she hadn't read carefully enough. "Okay." He searched her face, maybe expecting resistance, maybe hoping for it. She didn't give him any. They sat there a few more seconds, the kind that stretched too long, the kind where both people realize memory is already forming. "I'm sorry," he said. She almost laughed again. Sorry felt small, but she swallowed it. "Take care of yourself," she replied. He hesitated like he wanted to hug her, decided against it, stood up instead. And just like that, he walked away. No music swelling, no dramatic final look back, just footsteps fading into the sound of tires passing on the street beyond the trees. She stayed seated, not because she couldn't move, because if she moved too quickly, the reality might move with her. The sky darkened in slow increments. A streetlight flickered on nearby. She pressed her palms against her thighs, grounding herself. "This is fine," she told herself. Breakups happen, people grow apart, but the thought didn't settle, because deep down, she knew this wasn't about growing apart. It was about alignment. And misalignment has a history in her life. As she eventually stood, brushed invisible dust from her jeans, and walked toward her car, each step felt mechanical, deliberate. Her phone buzzed in her hand before she even reached the driver's seat. A text from Keisha. How'd it go? She stared at the screen. Keisha had never fully trusted Trey. Not openly critical, just observant. You sure? She had asked months ago when Jasmine first started glowing every time his name lit up her screen. He makes me feel alive, Jasmine had said then, smiling in a way that made discussion feel unnecessary. Alive. The word echoed now. She typed back. It's over. The reply came almost instantly. Call me. She didn't. Instead, she placed the phone face down in the passenger seat and started the engine. The drive home felt longer than usual. Red lights stretched, traffic slowed. Or maybe she was just more aware of time passing. Her apartment greeted her with stillness, no music playing, no television humming in the background, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone upstairs pacing. She dropped her keys on the counter and stood there, staring at nothing. Her couch looked the same, the throw blanket draped over one corner, the coffee table with two coasters slightly misaligned, a half-read book waiting where she'd left it days ago. Nothing in the room reflected that something had just shifted. That felt unfair. She moved to the bedroom slowly, like the air had thickened. Her Bible was still on the nightstand, closed. A thin layer of dust gathered along the top edge. She noticed it, didn't touch it. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bed and let the quiet stretch. As her mind replayed the bench conversation in loops, his tone, his choice of words, the way he said lead like it cost him something. Led. Marcus used that word too. Not arrogantly, not in control, responsibly. I don't just want to date you, Marcus had told her once. I want to cover you. She had teased him for sounding old-fashioned. He hadn't laughed. I'm serious, he'd said gently. If I'm not ready to lead you spiritually, I shouldn't keep you emotionally. At the time, she'd admired his conviction, but she hadn't felt moved. She wanted spark, wanted to feel chosen in a way that made her pulse jump. Marcus made her feel secure. Trey made her feel wanted. There was a difference, and she had chosen the one that felt louder. She lay back on the bed now, staring at the ceiling. When had the drift started? Not with Trey's first text, and not even with the first date. It had begun subtly. The morning she decided to skip her usual quiet time because she stayed up late on FaceTime. Just once, she told herself. The next morning she skimmed instead of studied. Then she prayed while multitasking. Then she stopped journaling altogether. Her spiritual discipline didn't collapse. It eroded, like shoreline under consistent waves. She never announced the shift, never said, I'm choosing this over God. She just rearranged her priorities until the difference was barely noticeable. And that was the danger, because nothing dramatic happened, no immediate consequences, no sudden conviction, just gradual distance. And distance feels manageable until it isn't. Her phone buzzed again, Keisha calling. She let it ring twice before answering. Hey, she said. There was a pause on the other end. Are you okay? The question landed gently. No judgment. No, I told you so. I don't know, Jasmine admitted. What happened? He said he can't lead me. Another pause. And that's it. Keisha exhaled slowly. Do you think he's wrong? The question irritated her. Why does everyone keep asking that? Because, Keisha said carefully, sometimes the person who walks away sees something we don't. Silence. Jasmine sat up. You think I don't see things clearly? I think, Keisha replied softly, that you wanted it to work. Of course she did. She wanted the story, wanted the kind of relationship that looked vibrant from the outside, wanted chemistry that didn't require patience to appreciate. You didn't feel peaceful with him, Keisha continued gently. I felt happy. That's not the same thing. The words pressed, uncomfortable. She remembered a night a few weeks ago when she had tried to pray and couldn't focus. Her mind kept drifting to Trey's plans, his schedule, whether he'd text her goodnight. She'd brushed it off, normal relationship stuff. Now it felt like evidence. Did you ever feel covered? Keisha asked quietly. The question stilled her. Covered, not entertained, not desired. Covered. She didn't answer, because the truth required courage. No, she said finally. The admission didn't feel dramatic. It felt exposing. Keisha didn't rush to fill the silence. I think, her friend said slowly, you confuse intensity with alignment. That one lingered. Intensity with alignment. She ended the call not long after, promising to talk more tomorrow. But tomorrow felt far away. Tonight was heavy. She slid off the bed and onto the floor, her back resting against the mattress. The room was dim now. Only the soft glow from the hallway filtered in. She let herself sit there. No distractions, no music, no scrolling, just the quiet she'd been avoiding for months. Why does this feel like I lost something important? She whispered. The answer didn't rush in. It surfaced, because it wasn't just about losing Trey. It was about confronting herself, and that realization was only beginning to unfold. She stayed on the floor longer than she intended. At first she told herself she just needed a minute. Then 10 passed, then 20. Time felt different when you weren't distracting yourself from it. The room held its shape in the dim light. Shadows stretched along the wall. The ceiling fan hummed softly above her, steady and indifferent. She pulled her knees to her chest and rested her forehead against them. When did I start negotiating with you? She asked quietly. It wasn't an accusation. It was a question she was finally brave enough to ask. Because if she was honest, this hadn't begun with Trey. It hadn't even begun with Marcus. It had begun with desire, with the subtle belief that wanting something strongly must mean it was right. She had always prayed, always asked for clarity. But somewhere along the way, her prayers shifted from surrender to persuasion. Lord, if this isn't for me, take it away. But when it wasn't taken, she interpreted silence as permission. When the warning wasn't loud, she assumed it didn't count. Marcus had been clear. She could see that now. Not pushy, not forceful, just anchored. I don't want to rush you, he told her one evening as they walked slowly through a bookstore downtown. But I also don't want to pretend I'm unsure when I'm not. She remembered stopping between shelves, studying his face. You're that certain? She'd asked. Yes. No theatrics, no trembling confession, just steadiness. And that steadiness had unnerved her. She didn't want to be someone's safe choice. She wanted to be someone's overwhelming desire. But Marcus had desired her, just not loudly. He had brought her flowers once, not because it was an anniversary or a milestone, but because he'd seen them and thought of her. They weren't extravagant, simple white lilies. You like things that last, he'd said, handing them to her. She had smiled politely. But later that night, heck, when Trey sent her a spontaneous voice note that made her laugh out loud, her heart had leapt higher than it ever did holding those lilies. She mistook elevation for depth. On the floor of her bedroom now, that memory pressed differently. Marcus had never made her question her spiritual direction. Trey hadn't either at first. But with Trey, she had stopped asking certain questions, not because he demanded it, because she didn't want the answers. She reached behind her blindly and grabbed her Bible from the nightstand, pulling it down into her lap. It felt heavier than she remembered, not physically, spiritually. She ran her fingers along the closed edge without opening it. "I knew," she whispered. The words tasted bitter, not because she had been clueless, but because she hadn't been. She had felt the peace with Marcus, not adrenaline, and not cinematic romance. Peace, and she had called it boring. She had labeled it lacking. She had told herself she deserved something that made her feel more. And maybe she did. But maybe more didn't mean louder. Maybe more meant deeper. Tears slid down her face again, slower this time, less frantic, more reflective. "When you gave me peace," she said softly, "I asked for butterflies instead." The confession settled in the room, not met with thunder, not met with shame, just stillness. And in that stillness, clarity sharpened. Trey hadn't broken her heart. He had exposed it, exposed that she valued intensity over alignment, excitement over covering, chemistry over calling. She opened the Bible finally, not searching for a specific verse, just opening. The pages rustled in the quiet. Her eyes landed without effort. She read a few lines, and then read them again, not because they were dramatic, because they were steady, steady like Marcus had been, steady like the peace she once felt and dismissed. Her breathing slowed. She leaned her head back against the bed and closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about what she wanted next. She was thinking about what she had avoided. Surrender had always sounded noble in theory. In practice, it meant giving up preference, and preference had been driving her. She wanted to feel chosen in a way that made her pulse race, wanted a love story that felt visible, impressive. But somewhere along the way, she stopped prioritizing whether it was anchored. "Why do I equate calm with compromise?" she asked quietly. The question felt important, because calm had scared her. How calm meant she couldn't blame adrenaline for her decisions. Calm meant she had to trust without spectacle. Butterflies are loud, peace is quiet. Butterflies demand reaction, peace demands trust. She had chosen reaction, and tonight, reaction had left her sitting on the floor. But strangely, the quiet didn't feel punishing. It felt clarifying. Her phone buzzed again, lighting up the dark room. A notification from social media. A couple she followed had just gotten engaged. She stared at the preview image, smiling faces, ring in the foreground, sunset behind them. Her chest tightened for a second. Then she turned the phone face down. Comparison had been another quiet erosion. Watching other people's highlights and measuring her own timeline against them. Maybe she hadn't just wanted butterflies. Maybe she wanted proof. Proof she wasn't behind. Proof she was desirable. Proof she was moving. But movement without direction is just motion. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt and shifted her legs out in front of her. "I don't want to keep choosing noise," she said softly. The sentence felt different, not dramatic, resolved. She thought about Marcus, not in longing, in honesty. If he were in front of her now, she wouldn't chase him. That chapter had closed because she closed it. But she could acknowledge the lesson without trying to rewrite the past. Peace had been present once. She had walked away from it. That didn't mean peace was gone forever. It meant she needed to recognize it when it returned, even if it didn't come wrapped in fireworks. Her grip on the Bible loosened. Her shoulders dropped. For the first time that night, as she felt something shift internally. Not relief, not joy. Alignment. A small, quiet realignment. "Okay," she whispered. Just that. Okay. No bargaining. No conditions. If obedience meant waiting, she would wait. If it meant being single longer than she planned, she would sit with it. If it meant choosing someone steady over someone thrilling in the future, she would not call steady boring again. The lesson had cost her, but it had also clarified her. She placed the Bible back on the nightstand, this time without dusting it off in avoidance. Tomorrow she would open it intentionally. Tomorrow she would rebuild what she allowed to erode. Tonight, she just needed to sit in the honesty of it. The room felt different now, not brighter, but lighter. Her circumstances hadn't changed. Trey was still gone. Marcus was still a memory, but something inside her had settled, not into disappointment, into responsibility. She had chosen before. She could choose again, and this time she would not confuse intensity with alignment. She slid into her bed slowly, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The ceiling looked the same as it had an hour ago, but her thoughts were quieter. As sleep edged closer, one final realization settled in her chest. Peace had never been boring. She had just been afraid of what it required. Trust. And trust doesn't flutter. It roots. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt safe.